Okay, this video is going to be on combining objects together. Let's delete these really quickly. Okay, start fresh. So I got this question. This is going to be in general about combining multiple primitives or different objects that you model together. And in general, that's kind of my approach. Is I usually, if I have distinctly differently shaped objects, I like to kind of make them out of separate primitives or objects and then try to figure out how to stitch them together. And the rule that you should follow in general is that anything that needs to be combined together, you need to figure out pretty early on how you want to combine it together. So this person has, it's kind of like a turntable, he's just blocking it in, but he has this rod coming up and it's going to connect to the head. And it's tough because I don't know exactly, like there's a couple things that could be different. Like there might be a hole right here, so this might be a rod that inserts into a plastic head that's kind of covering it, right? That might be what's happening. Or maybe it's a single welded piece of plastic, like this is all made from the same plastic mold, right? And so that'd be very different approaches, and I'll try both of those and show that here, right? And so in most of these cases, let's kind of take a look at a few other models just to kind of talk about some of these things, right? If you have objects that aren't physically, like if think about them if they're being made in real life, right? If they're not physically the same object in real life, like this panel against this wood or even these screws against this panel, right? Then there's not really any reason to actually connect them through geometry, right? They can have their own unique topology, their own, like this could have like a lot of edges and faces, and this might have a couple edges and faces, right? There's not really any reason for you to actually combine them together or try to connect their vertices to each other, right? Same thing went down here. These should be just separate pieces, right? This whole thing should be a separate piece, and so should this be. It's this thing, and this right here, these screws should be separate pieces as well, right? The question in these ones is, is it going to be like, let's see if there's a good example. Is it going to be like this joystick, right? So this joystick is indented into this case. So even though there's separate objects, I still need to make a hole right here for that joystick to insert into, right? Same thing with these buttons. I want that hole that they're going to sit in because it's going to make it look more believable, right? So that's a different consideration that I'd have to make, right? Whereas, something like this object, this orange piece, besides these two panels right here, is probably more or less welded together, even though I could see this kind of front part right here being a distinct shape and then this handle part being a distinct separate shape as well, right? So those are like one welded piece of plastic, okay? So let's take a look at that example I was talking about a second ago. I think I downloaded, where is that image? It's in Slack, okay. All right, so I'm gonna take two approaches with this one. All right, so the problem it currently has in that screenshot, or the rule that we're going to follow with this, is that anywhere where you're going to connect two pieces together, is their topology needs to be fairly similar in terms of vertice or edge count, right? They can be different, and you can get around that, right? Sometimes it's unavoidable that one piece is just going to be more complex than the other. That's okay. Let me go ahead and give this a few more subdivision levels. Let's just do 4, 4, okay. All right, so let's just say this is the square piece I blocked out, and then it was easier for me to work with a cylinder, right? All right, for the main rod, right? Let's say I was modeling that out as a rod. Move that over here, and let me scale it. Scale it out that way. I'll make it a little bit bigger, and we'll touch this here. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to combine them together, and then I need to use some method of connecting the edges and vertices together, whether that's using using target weld, right, to take one vertex and collapse it into another, or take an edge and collapse into another edge, right? Or I have like a hole that I make and I need to bridge things together using the bridge tool, right? So taking two edges and then bridging across like that. Go ahead and step back. Oh, Let me go ahead and pause this really quickly because I think Maya is crashing. Okay, so I'm back. My Maya crashed, and so this is where I was last time. All right, so the main thing is I need to figure out how these are going to stitch together. But I can see here that no matter what technique I use to kind of weld these guys together, these guys have very different poly counts to them, right? This one's pretty intense, and this one's really dense right now. And so it's going to be hard to combine these together. I'm going to do an attempt, right? So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate these over here. So I'm going to come in here. In general, if you can have, if you can create a shape or approximate a shape with lower topology, it's usually better to try to do that in the first place. Instead of having, like, if there's no reason for this cylinder to be this many edge loops, then I might recreate the cylinder with fewer edge loops, right? But let's go in here. And so I'm just going to do like a really basic, let's see, let's grab that, bridge together. And so I'm going to delete these guys just to prepare this hole, right? So I got two holes, and I'm going to weld them together. So the bridge tool will not work because it's going to tell me it doesn't work with multiple objects. Okay, so I have to grab my mesh, combine. Okay, now it still won't work, but for a different reason. All right, poly edge requires equal number of border edges to be selected for source and target selection. Okay, so what I would need to do is I would need to figure out a way to start to merge these vertices down, or these edges down, to a fewer number of edges, so that I can start to connect these guys together. So what I might do is I might merge that, and let's see, actually let me undo that one for a second. Let's take such an awkward number of vertices. So let me go ahead and weld that one together, weld these three together, weld these three together, right, weld these three together using the merge to center tool, and I'll talk about that in a second. I'm just demonstrating this, right? And so now I have, double click this, and I have 8 vertices or edges because of my mesh display right here, which I turned on by going to display, transform display, or sorry, heads up display poly count, so I can see how many polygons I have. I have 8 selected right here. And then I could select those, and then I could go ahead and bridge them together. And then what I would want to do is I'd want to take all of these guys and flatten them down in one plane, right? That's one way I could weld it. It's not a good looking weld at all, right? And you can see I'm starting to get some nasty artifacting on this, right? So what I could do is I could add an edge loop down here, right? So poles and, so these are poles right here, and bad or unevenly shaped polygons are not as noticeable on flat surfaces, right? So if I go ahead and move this down a little bit more, right? So I'm just kind of putting a sharper hold edge on there. You can see it's not as noticeable because that pooling that's happening is now contained to this flat edge. Whereas when I got rid of these two edge loops, that pooling was happening up on the surface, right? Because it's pooling all the way from up here, right? You see that edge loop right there is being pulled upwards, right? And so this pole and these gnarly polygons, or these unevenly shaped polygons, are being pulled onto a curved surface, right? So curved surfaces are generally where you don't want to have, you know, these weird connections and these poles, right? So these polygons with more than 4 vertices on them connecting, right? I'm going to make these quads because these are triangles. I'm just going to delete the edge right there, and so those are actually quads now. But either way, let's go ahead and I'm going to insert an edge loop here. If I still need this to be a fairly smooth transition, right, you can see this is still kind of getting a little weird bumpiness right there because of these weirdly shaped polygons right here. And so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to select all of these guys, and oops, and I can just kind of slide them onto the flat surface instead of the curved surface, right? So I might select this, and I'll just kind of scale them out, right? And there's I'm looking at this and trying to think of a way to make this a little bit cleaner. But let's go ahead and insert another edge loop. All right. And so you can see here, I'm still getting some weird welding right there. You can see it's kind of getting this weird bulge, and what it probably means is I probably need to grab all of these vertices. So let me go ahead and grab all those vertices there. Let me get rid of all the ones that don't matter. Okay. And then I'm just going to flatten them. So I'll just choose a pivot point that's flat on the surface, and then I can just flatten these guys down. And I'm probably not going to be able to notice it, right? Let me go ahead and assign a blend material so I can get specular reflection, right? This might be a little too sharp, so what I might do is I might grab this edge loop right here, and we can slide this up a bit, right? So now we have a softer transition. But the nice thing about this is that because this curvature or this change in direction is happening in these straight rectangular polygons and edge loops, this stuff out here, because it's on the flat, is not, or on the flat surface, it's not pulling or distorting the shape. Okay, so that's if I had like a really complicated or like a mesh with more intense topology and I wanted to weld down, right? But what might be easier is to, if I plan it ahead of time, is to select my polygon. Let's see, I'll go ahead and place it. My select, not polygon, my object. I'll go ahead and CDV. Okay, I'm gonna snap it to this surface over here. There we go. I'll just make it skinnier. Okay. Okie dokie. And so what I might do is I just might actually, I don't really need this many edge loops going off this object, right? And so it's probably easier, it's going to be easier for me in the long run if I just make my poly count for this cylinder to match up nicely with my cube, right? Or vice versa, make this poly cube have more subdivision levels so it matches better with this cylinder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this object, and let me turn on wireframe unshaded so I can see the edge loops of both. And I might bring this down to something like 8, right? I like them to be divisible by 2 at least, and some people really like it if it's a power of 2, so like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, I think, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that's, you know, doing divisions of 2 are fine too, because I think it creates this nice like kind of midline that goes through the center of the object and across the object, whereas odd numbers doesn't really have a nice center line, which is kind of frustrating. Okay, so I mean, I know from experience that this is going to line up nicely, right? These edges are going to connect nicely in terms of number, but if I'm ever in doubt, I can come over to my object and I can go ahead and prepare the hole I'm going to attach, right? So I can select this, delete these faces, right? And I can double click on this edge loop and I can see this is 8 polygons. So whenever I create or modify my cylinder, I can know, oh, I need 8 polygons, right? Or 8 edges, right? So I'm gonna come over here, let's grab these faces in here, let's unselect this face, I'll delete that to prepare, I need to prepare both ends of the hole, right? I'm gonna grab both of these meshes, combine, all right? And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do a simple bridge. Okay. You can see I don't really have to do any cleanup. These are all quads. They had the same number of polygons, so it was really easy to bridge. Let's go ahead and just add another division in there, maybe 2 more just to kind of make the transition a little sharper, right? And let's go ahead and add a few subdivision levels in some areas just to make this look a little bit cleaner. Oops. All right, and then let's go ahead and add another one that goes to right here, just to make that sharper. All right, and then let's assign existing material blend, so it has all the same material, and then I'm going to turn off wireframe unshaded, right? And so that was a lot easier to make. Let's go ahead and get rid of, I can probably get rid of a lot of these edge loops, just get rid of one of those maybe. I'll get rid of that one too. So that was a lot easier for me to make and connect together, right? And so it was a lot cleaner. So if this is unavoidable where we have you know, a ton of edge loops, right? We just have to find a way where we're going to start combining the edge loops together, or merging them into fewer edge loops to get a simpler geometry, right? And let's take a look at a few ways we can do this. I have some topology guides that are on, what does this one do? Merge vertices based on selection. Okay. I have some topology guides that can, visual guides that are helpful for this on the drive. So you go to the class drive. Let's see. Course materials, animation, tutorials. And then I have a image link in here for visual demonstrations of, once this loads, it's taking forever for some reason. I'm going to go ahead and pause it until it starts. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to click on this, and you'll see, oh, I put that in there. I think this one I put into hard surface, or I wanted to put it in hard surface. Yep, that's fine. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go to edge flow, and you can see there's some tutorials in here showing, or visual guides showing how to reduce or change edge loops from one, essentially a number of edges to fewer polygons or edges, right? So this case they're going from 5 faces down to 3 faces, right? So let's take a look at some of these. So we'll go here. So going from 2 to 1, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have 2 faces right here. And let's go, I'm going to bring this down to height. We'll bring this down to something like that. Make these a little bit more square. All right, so I have 2 polygons here, and I want to bring them down into a single polygon. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine 3 vertices together, or 3 edges at least. We'll go click merge, merge, and merge. And so I'm missing the edge on this side. Actually, let me go ahead and do it over here. Okay, merge, 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 right? And so this is actually, this is actually slightly different. This is to essentially take this down from 3 into 2, right? Or 3 edges and down into 1 edge, right? So that's one way I like to do if I'm looking at it from an edge perspective and how I want to take 3 edges and bring them down to 1 edge, right? If I want to bring down 3 faces down to, I think it's 1 face, what we need to do is we need to, let's take a look at that reference image just as a refresher, right? So we have 3 down to 1, right? And so the way it's working is, what they're doing is they're taking this polygon and they're actually redirecting it back into the other polygon, right? You can do that multiple times in different directions, right? In this case, this is the same thing, actually 3 to 1, they just put 2 edges on the other side of it, so I'm not quite sure what they're trying to visually accomplish there, but let's take a look back at Maya, right? And so if I wanted to reduce these 3 faces, or these 3 loops here, down into 1 loop, what I can do is I can actually take this edge here and then start redirecting it. Let's go ahead and I'm going to redirect it this way. And we'll go this here. Oh, I feel like I'm doing this wrong. Let me double check my work. Oh, okay, never mind. I'm doing this in a silly way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to Control Z. I'm going to essentially have an edge loop in here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to combine the vertices around the border of it, right? So I'll go this way, and I'll take some cleaning up in the other areas, but we'll just do it this way. Let's do it. Let's do it this way. And then let's merge those, right? And then what I can do is I can, then that means I can get rid of 2 edges in this direction, 2 edges in this direction, right? So I can get rid of this edge loop. this edge loop, right? Oh, it won't let me do that one. There we go. Right, and then I can grab this, grab these vertices, and straighten them out. I can combine these guys using the merge vertices, and then I can go ahead and straighten these guys out as well. Right, and so that's how I could reduce 3 edge loops, right? So I had 3 coming from up here down to 1 down here, right? Which removes 2 edge loops in this direction, right? So I'm losing 2 edge loops this direction, and I'm also losing an edge loop in this direction. Okay. Alternatively, what I could do is, let's go ahead and get rid of this one. I could increase them, right? I can go the opposite way where I need to go from a lower poly area to a higher poly area, right? I could just go, what I could do is I'm going to grab this face. I'm going to cut this into 3 polygons. So I'm going to go from 1 polygon to 3 polygons, right? Sometimes what I like to do is, if I want to use a multi-cut to kind of plan it out and cut it out, what I'll do is I'll just fill in a hole that's, you know, not really ready to be filled in, right? It's an n-gon, right? If I look at this smooth shaded, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 polygons, so it's not good. But I like to have a surface to cut on sometimes. So then what I'll do is I'll just kind of cut that shape I did over here. So I'll hold Control-Shift to make that a straight line, Control-Shift to make it a straight line, Control-Shift to make it a straight line, and then I'll just connect these guys to these corners to break this n-gon into 3 quads. Right. And I need to combine these vertices right here because I didn't quite weld those up right. Okay, and that's almost going the opposite direction where I had fewer polygons and I needed to go into higher polygons, right? So doing that diamond method where I'm combining 3 edges, let's go ahead and insert those really quickly. Let's do this guy. Right. So the diamond method, which is just somewhere down the, if I'm going from 3 edges, I want to go down to 1 edge. I'll get rid of 2 edges. And I'll just go ahead and merge these guys together, merge these guys together. And then this leaves me with 2 triangles right here. And if I have 2 triangles, I can just delete an edge between them and they become a single quad, right? So that's one method, going from 3 to 1. And this is going from 3 faces down to 1 face, right? Okay. So let's take a look back over here, right? What I did before was I just made sure when I was combining these 2 objects together that I had that both of those objects that are going to be welded together, or the place where they're going to weld together, that they had a similar number of polygons, right? So I made sure that the hole, or I went ahead and created a hole so I could easily count how many polygons I was going to have, or how many edges were going to be on the border, right? And then I checked that number, right, which is 8, right? And then I looked at the number of edges around my cylinder, and I made sure that was 8. If it wasn't 8, then I either recreated the cylinder since it was already so easy to make, or if I had a really complex object and I still needed all those polygons up there, I figured out a way to combine those together. And what I was combining down here was I was doing something similar to what I was doing here with the 3 down to 1, right? So just combining some of the vertices at a certain point, or edges until they collapse down to fewer edges. Okay. The other option I could do is, and then what I did was, once I had these in position, I prepared both the holes between both objects, and then I just bridged them together once they had the same number of edge loops, right? In this scenario, what I could also do is I could go ahead and prepare a circular hole shape, and then extrude it out, or I could just go ahead and make instead of doing a bridge like this, I can get a very specific hole shape right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this, I'm going to extrude, right? And then what I'm going to do is actually, let me go ahead and extrude, right? And then I'm going to use offset. So I'm going to hold Control-Shift to get small, oh, did it crash? Oh no, my mouse died. So small offset, so Control-Shift right here. And then what I can do is I can click on the Circularize button, which is right here, or under Edit Mesh Circularize. And you can see that's already a circular shape. And then I could, if I had my cylinder object I wanted to connect here, then I could go ahead and delete this hole and then just connect them and either use Target Weld tool, right? The Target Weld tool to merge vertices together, or I could bridge them together by selecting both boundary edges and clicking the bridge button Or, you know, what I could do is also have this already here. If I hadn't made my cylinder shape yet, or it's just a really basic cylinder I'm still blocking in, I could just as easily, if I made this circle, just extrude this upwards and out like that. And so I'm actually already creating my cylinder, right? Just add a few edge loops just to hold the shape when I smooth it. Okay. Oops, I added a couple more than I needed, but you can see 3 different ways to kind of create or attach the same object. And so that's going from like a circular cylindrical object to a round object, right? And it can get more complex depending on the objects you're creating, right? Let's take a look at a few of the other examples, right? I talk about in a different video something like this, like really complex solid shapes that are made of multiple different primitives, like this one. I could probably approach it in a similar fashion I just did, where I'm going ahead and, you know, laying out blocking out these shapes and then trying to figure out how I'm going to stitch them together. I might use booleans, right? Because the nice thing about booleans is it kind of can really help with these really complex curvilinear kind of intersections that still need to be welded together, right? And I cover that in a different video. I might make a separate video just on this object because it's a pretty complex object. You know, I might make like a cylinder here, you know, like some sort of rounded cube that kind of becomes like a hot dog shape right here, like a cube right here that I just bend into shape. And then I make sure those poly counts are fairly low, and I'm adding edge loops or removing edge loops, or making sure their poly counts are the same, so that wherever they line up, it's going to be pretty easy for me to like start connecting them together, right? Let's take a look at a few more. Let's see, I think I had one in my lecture. Not this one. Okay, so for instance, let's say we are taking a look at something like this, right? If these are separate objects, right, like this should I don't need to weld or figure out how this is going to connect to this object because it doesn't really matter, right? But let's say these 2 pieces of metal are welded together, right? If I was going to, you know, connect them together, you can see this person who modeled this isn't physically connecting together. They're just kind of sitting next to each other and not connecting. But if I wanted to, then what I would need to figure out is how these edge loops at the top of this object would line up with this one, right? And so what I might do is I'm going to make it like a more simplified version of that one, just because I don't want to spend too much time. So let's rotate this one, J. All right, and then let's skinny that up. And then I'm going to create another one. Before I start doing any heavy modifications to these shapes in terms of like deleting and adding edge loops, it's in order to keep my the functionality of the polycylinder tool, you know, how it creates these objects. I like to not modify the topology, because as soon as you modify the topology, like if I add an edge loop or something like that, or delete an edge, you'll notice that it starts to behave in very unpredictable ways. Right, you can see that edge is like disappearing or going into weird funky spots, right? You can see it's breaking up like that. So modifying the topology by hand, by either editing or deleting stuff, you know, kind of ruins this tool, right? And so at a certain point you're going to ruin it anyways, and so you just have to live with it. But that's just a thing you have to keep in mind, right? And so these objects, let's go ahead and scale this down in this direction. So it kind of has something sort of like this, where I'm going from a, you know, this kind of like bell shape, and I would spend more time blocking out that actual shape. Oh, you can see I modified this in a bad way. Let's go ahead and bring this down to something lower, like 8. I just like 8. 8's a great number for lower poly objects. Okay. Let's scale this up. Okay. And it's kind of like what I did in the Boolean video, if you check that out, is I try to figure out how these objects are going to, their edges are going to merge together when I actually finally combine them together, right? And so what I might do is, I can see here that, let's go ahead and pull this guy down a little bit, and I might pull this vertice on both sides, upwards like that, right? And so what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that trying to get these shapes to like kind of line up with each other, but I'm stretching it too much. So when if I pull this up, you'll notice in smooth mode it's going to really change the shape. So what I might do is I might add like an edge loop here, an edge loop here. Let's get that rounded bell shape. So let's say I have like a bell shape going on that I like. And so now what I can do is, and let's pull this up a little touch. Now, since I have this holding edge here, I can kind of pull this up a little bit more safely. And it will distort it right there, but it's not going to distort the whole entire shape, right? So what I need to do here, and again, I'll probably just worry about one side and not worry about the other side for now. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to grab these edges, or these faces, and prepare the hole, right? So preparing the hole on this object is a little bit more complicated, right? Because we don't have faces here, and it's also intersecting in a really weird way on this curved surface. So if I wasn't using a Boolean, what I would do is I would just start adding edges and cutting into this shape to get what I need, right? So I'm going to add an edge loop here, and then now I'm going to go ahead and start using the multi-cut tool, right, to start to cut this in preparation, right? Okay, and I'm going to leave that on that side for now because I'm going to mirror this across in a little bit. So I'm just going to get those edge loops lined up, and I'll just terminate it over here. Doesn't really matter on that side because I'm going to get rid of it. And so what I might do is I might go in here, okay, delete that. Okay, combine these two objects together, mesh, combine. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start stitching these two guys together. I like the cylinder shape. I don't really want to mess up the cylinder shape too much. The welding point of this bell, you know, is where I'm going to kind of get a little looser with the shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use target weld, and I'm going to weld the pieces of the bell to the cylinder, right? So I'll just grab these guys, pull this one to the cylinder, okay, this one to the cylinder, and I'm not going to worry about this backside too much because again I'm going to mirror it, and let's go ahead and take a look at this. And let's add a few subdivision levels on the main body so it doesn't pull quite as much. I added two there by accident. Let's add one right there. Okay, and it's not beautiful, right? But it's working, right? And so that's an easy way to kind of weld those together. And what I could do is I can add, you know, start adding an edge loop in there, and let's go ahead and add that there, and then let's, you know, start moving and scaling this around, and I can tweak the shape to get the welding to look exactly how I want it to, right? And so, yeah. So that's just like, essentially that's the main principle behind this, don't worry about the other side, is that where they're going to actually weld together and connect needs to be, have like a hole or a shape or some kind of connecting point where they kind of meet up and they have the same number of vertices or polygons, or you can kind of figure it out. And it's definitely way easier when my object is much lower poly count like these objects than if it's like a super high resolution. This is not even super high resolution, but this is getting into the realm of a lot of vertices, right? So yeah, so that's kind of like the main principle for that. Let me see if there's a few other objects I might want to talk about. Oh, let's talk about, I'll go back to that picture of this controller, right? So this idea that we need to create a hole, right, for like a button to sit in, right? So let's just take a look at that button really quickly. Right, so let's say I create a cylinder, right? The nice thing is when two objects are different in terms of actually being separate objects and not physically welded together, like a button sitting inside of a hole on a controller, right? I don't really need these edge loops to match up with these edge loops, right? I only just need their shapes to kind of match each other, right? So even though this cylinder right here has 20 polygons and this hole I'm about to create only has 8 polygons or edges, then it's going to be I don't have to spend quite as much time figuring out how to connect the topology, right? Because that's the puzzle. That's what you spend a lot of time working and modeling on, right? So I'm just going to do kind of what I did before, where I just do an extrusion and scale it down, and then I'm going to circularize it. Oop. There we go. Let's go ahead and scale this down to right around here. can go ahead and start smoothing it. And then I'm going to extrude, and then I can extrude this into the body. Let's look at this flat shaded for a second. And then let's go ahead and I want to grab this. You can see when I smooth it, it becomes a weird little gooey, massless form. I need it to be a little bit harder edge. So I'm just going to select this edge loop right here, and then I'm just going to bevel it with a smaller fraction. Okay, and you can see now I have, let's go ahead and I'll grab this guy too, bevel, and insert like an edge loop right around here just to kind of help with the shape a bit. And let's add another one down that way. Add another one down there. Okay. Right, and so there we go. And I can make that, I probably should make the this hole a little tighter. Right, so it just almost hugs the object. Right, and so that's what if there, sometimes if I have like let's say I have like a switch or a panel, right? Right, they're like separate pieces, but they're kind of overlapping in a way that you're not going to see, right? So on this case of this turntable, like this panel here, this dial here, this dial here, I don't really have to prepare a hole at all, right? Because I just need them to sit on the surface, and there should be enough of a gap so they're going to cast a shadow on each other, right? I don't want them to intersect each other. Like, you don't want anything to penetrate each other like that. That's kind of, that always looks kind of fake, so I want it to have like a little bit of a, let me go ahead and just add this a little bit so it's easier to see in 3D, right? And so I want it to kind of feel like it's sitting on the surface, right? And so in that case, it's super easy. I don't need to prepare a hole for it to insert into. I don't need to prepare a hole for it to connect to or weld to. It just needs to kind of be in two objects in the right place, right? This one right here is if I have separate objects, so that their topology doesn't have to match at all, but the shape of where it's inserting does. Like in terms of like the shape of the cylinder and the shape of this hole, they need to be similar shaped, right? And then when I need them to weld together so they look like they're made of the same object, then I need to make sure my topology is going to match up wherever they're going to weld together. Okay, so that's a lot of different ways of kind of approaching welding multiple objects together. And if you want to know more about this, or you're handling like a more complex object or surface, I check out the Boolean video I've also uploaded, and that hopefully can answer some of your other questions. Okay.